that's me. Title of the talk. It's in French, but we can deal with that. It's the same thing in English. It still doesn't exist. And to explain why it doesn't exist, I'm going to go through the history, actually a little bit, of AI, and to go to the history, I'm going to start where it officially started, back in 1956. In 1956, there were some scientists in the University of Dartmouth in the States who decided that they did model a neuron with a mathematical function. Okay, so and by extrapolation, they said, okay, we have a neuron now, so we have a neural network. If we have a neural network, we have a brain. If we have a brain, we have artificial intelligence. Obviously, that's stupid, and that doesn't work like that. Okay, so and you know very well, I guess, that a lot of people here are doing some mathematics somehow, and you know very well that in mathematics, starting from false rarely goes to true. If it goes to true, it means that it's chance, okay? Anyway, so bottom line, those guys, they started with a false assumption. That was this model of this neuron, that was very, very simplistic. And we're going to see in a minute that they obviously failed in what they were trying to do. But if I were to start to talk about artificial intelligence, and if I were to start to understand what is artificial intelligence and what it should be, in my mind, it's very much like what we were talking about just earlier. It's augmented intelligence. So it's our augmented intelligence. So it's tools there are tools that are going to augment ourselves. Okay. So I could actually start the history, the real history of artificial intelligence back in 300,000 years ago, or in the antiquity or whatever. But I'm going actually, since when we are in France and since I'm very French, I'm going to start the beginning of artificial intelligence in 1642. What was 1642? It was the year where Pascal invented the Pascaline. Pascaline is the first calculator, basically. So it's the first machine that was that gave the ability to very quickly do addition and subtraction. So it wasn't very, very complex, right? It was a set of wheels, but it was very interesting because it was a tool that was much better already than us. If I'm asking right now, what is 783 plus 222? You have the answer, okay? So the machine did it, a long time ago, okay, already. You didn't. So it doesn't mean that you are stupid. I won't go there, but I don't think that it is the case. And even though somebody gave the answer to this thing, the chances are high that the answer is going to be wrong, because we are humans, and the machine never fails. This one, at least. Okay, so bottom line, what I'm saying here is that we need to be very careful when we are talking about those machines and to say that they are intelligent, that maybe the tasks that they are doing are not that intelligent. Okay, and at the end, they are going to help us to do some tasks that we don't want to do and that we are not that fast to do, and they are going to be much better than us on those particular tasks, but they are very, very, very limited tasks. Okay, I'm going to come back to my good friends, at the University of Dartmouth, back in 1956. The other mistake that they did at the time is that they started to, they wanted to tackle a very, very difficult problem, which is natural language. They said, we are going to solve natural language. Unfortunately, I hope that you know that language, is something that is proper to us, the humans, right? Descartes said that, and you should believe him. And it's very, very, very difficult problem. Not only because, the way we are talking and the way we are conveying ideas. So obviously what happened, after 3-5 years, they failed. Because there was no way with their modelization of the neuron that they had no ways to actually solve natural language like what they are hoping. And what happened at the time, of course, was the first winter of AI. We are talking a lot about winter of AI, and back in the 60s, it was the first winter of AI. because of the fact that they promised something that they didn't deliver. And if I'm here today, and if I'm, talking about intelligence, artificial, the way I'm talking artificial intelligence, the way I'm talking about artificial intelligence, it's because I'm very afraid of a new winter of AI. And AI, the way I'm going to describe it, has actually a lot of potential still. We are just at the beginning. And if we are continuing, if some people in the media or in books and whatever are continuing to talk about AI the way we are talking about it, by saying that we have to fear it, or it's going to produce things that it's never going to produce, we have a chance, or we have a risk to go to a new winter of AI, because people are going to be disappointed, or people are going to be plain, afraid of it. So we need to be very, very careful, because again, AI has a lot of potential, at least the one that I like, which is machine learning and deep learning. Anyway, let me go, a little bit more there. So because there was some, it was a failure, basically, the very first neural network. People went in the 70s into system expert systems. So expert systems is basically a set of rules, right? And basically it's what AI was for about 40 years after that. And some people were continuing to do something else, but the focus was really on the expert system. And in 1997, the very first machine, Deep Blue, that did beat Kasparov at chess, was a set of rules, basically. And because the game of chess is just a game with rules, it was, quote unquote, easy to model all the possible plays, the possible places in the game of chess. Mathematicians are going to tell you that there are about 10 at the power of 50 possible moves in chess. And so at the time, in 1997, it was possible to basically put everything in the memory, and there was enough computing power to calculate from any point to another what was the victory. So, it wasn't anything like intelligence, but it was, a lot of calculation, a lot of memory. In the meantime, as I said, people were continuing to do some machine learning, but it was very, much something that people didn't claim too loud, because it wasn't really fashionable. Then, in the mid-90s, what happened, is another thing that is very, very interesting. It's called the internet. So the internet is very interesting because basically it became the biggest database in the world. And the database is basically what we need to do those machine learning and those deep learning functions that we are talking about today and that we are doing about today, right? So the machine needs a lot of data. And by 2007, we realized that we could test the algorithm that we developed with machine learning with all the data that was on the internet. For a reason that I don't explain myself, and that I don't know about, there were at the time, and there is still, a lot of cats on the internet. So here you are saying, what is he talking about? But there is a logic, don't worry, it's coming. So there were a lot of cats on the internet, images of cats, and people, to validate basically their algorithms, they said, okay, the very first thing that I'm going to do a cat recognizer, right? So they did a cat recognizer, but to create a cat recognizer that was good enough, we realized that we needed a lot of instances of cats, right? So to do something that is pretty good, let's say, so of course I don't want to generalize, but to do something that is pretty good, we basically need about 100 images of cats, right? And this thing is going to recognize cats at about 95%, It's going to recognize cats most of the time, but not cats in the dark, or not cats drawn by Picasso, for instance. Okay? Because there are not enough instances of cats drawn by Picasso in the database. But anyway, so 100,000, is a good number, but it's not the technique that I'm looking at here. Is the question, how many images of cats do we need ourselves, us the humans, to recognize cats forever, even in the dark, and even when it's drawn by Picasso? And that part I don't know, but at least, to recognize cats all the time. Do you have any idea how many instances of cats do we need? 1, 2, 5. Okay, so psychologists, that I want to trust, say about 2. My daughter, my 2-year-old daughter, needs 2 images of cats to recognize cats all the time. Why? It's easy to understand why. I mean, she doesn't recognize the image of the cat. She recognizes the cat as something in the context. It doesn't go that way, on the thing. It's something, that has a certain size, color, and so on. So, I mean, there are a lot of context that is not actually in the machine that we are building here, because we are just building the image of the cat, right? But anyway, what is interesting there is that the difference between the machine and the human is definitely a lot of differences. And what I want to point out here is that the techniques that are used in artificial intelligence have nothing to do with the techniques that we are using ourselves with the real intelligence. This is the first example of it, but I'm just going to give you a second one that I find even more interesting and scary. Second example comes from what happened, in 2014, 2016. It's a game again, right? So there was the world champion of Go who was beaten by the machine, DeepMind, with the program AlphaGo. And the machine, beat this guy at Go. Go is a little bit more complex than chess. We talked about chess earlier. It was just 10 at the power of 50 possible moves. Here, the mathematicians are going to tell us that they are between 10 to the power of 172 and 10 to the power of 762 moves. What I just told you right now is that we have no idea, right? Because, I mean, it's a lot of difference between 172 and 762. So, basically, Go is not a finite game like chess is. Okay, not at the mathematical level. But anyway, so bottom line, we use some techniques there that were not only the techniques that were used by the expert systems, but we had to put some machine learning in this thing. So the initial AlphaGo needed something like 30,000 games of Go in order to be trained, and then with a conjunction of rules, it basically beat this guy. So it's interesting, but it's not a technique that I want to look at. It's actually the power that is consumed by those two beasts here. This one on the left, DeepMind, had 1,500 CPUs. CPUs are little chips, in the computer, so 1,500 CPUs, about 300 GPUs. GPUs, are those very specific graphical processing units that are doing some matricial calculations, so very specialized. And about 30 TPUs. TPUs is another specialized chip that is done by Google to do some TensorFlow processing, basically. Okay, so let's say 2,000 processors in this thing. 2,000 processors, 2,000 computers, we can say. It's about a very small data center, but it's still a lot of power. This thing was about 440 kilowatt an hour. 440 kilowatt an hour, okay? Just to play Go. This thing, do you have any idea how much power do we develop when we play Go or when we do anything else? 1 kilowatt? 100? Our brain is 20 watts. 20 watts an hour, okay? So this guy here, was 20 watts an hour. This guy was 20,000 times more. 20,000 times more. Just to play Go. This thing, hopefully, can do something else, okay? So here again, like the story of the 100,000 vs the 2, the power should interrogate ourselves. If we are creating systems that are going to, need that much power for every single domain that we are creating system for, we are going directly in the wall, okay? Planet cannot sustain that. So we need to think about that. I will come back to that later. But very quickly, I want to go back to the data. We are talking about data. We need a lot of data. But we need to be careful with the data. Back in 2016, Another thing happened. It was Tai or Tay. It was the Microsoft chatbot on Twitter. I don't know if you heard about that, but at that time there was a little bit of an issue with this chatbot. Microsoft had to unplug it after 16 hours because it became, in the history of chatbots, it became the most racist and sexist chatbot in the world. Something incredible, something unbelievable. This thing, started to insult the black people and women, like crazy. So there were two mistakes. At least, this is what, the people want to think. But, it's a good illustration. Basically, this thing, the chatbot needs some data, right? And it needs also something that we call adaptability. When we create a system, you want the system to go well with the environment in which you are going to deploy the system. So the adaptability is going basically to take the same kind of language that the population that you are releasing this to, is going to have. On Twitter, I'm told, because I'm not on Twitter, but I'm told that on Twitter, after 2 or 3 interactions, people are insulting themselves. So in this case, it looks like the adaptability factor, was a little bit too high, and the chatbot, after 2 or 3 interactions, started to insult people. So, okay, first thing interesting, But the second thing, the much more interesting one, and maybe the much more difficult one to grasp, is the kind of data that they use to train the chatbot. Training a chatbot is not easy because finding conversation that is annotated is not easy, right? But there is a database that exists since the 50s that is called Switchboard. Switchboard is a very good database that has annotated conversation between 2 people, and so it allows us to understand the structure of a conversation, right? So people that are doing speech recognition or that are doing natural language, they are using Switchboard, forever. But it happens that in this particular case, the Microsoft people didn't choose the right subset of Switchboard. They used a Switchboard from the south of the States in the 50s. No? Not right? South of the States in the 50s? Okay. So obviously, the thing started to be very racist and very sexist very rapidly. So the bottom line, what it says here, it says that we need to be very, very careful when you choose the data. The data bias is something that can happen to anybody, and we need to be very careful when you select the data. I want to very, very quick now to go to black box. I heard the word black box just before. I mean, I don't have much time. I won't go there unless there is a question later. But there is no black box. Black box doesn't exist in the current artificial intelligence that we have. Inexplicability doesn't exist. We can explain everything. We can theoretically explain everything. It's very difficult to do it in real because there are a lot of calculation by second, millions of calculation. But if we had, 1,000, 1 million, 10 million lives, we could actually take all the calculation, and retrace a result through those, neurons that I was talking about that are just mathematical functions. We could do it. It's practically impossible, but it's not mathematically impossible. Okay? So it means that there is no black box. We can always explain. So we should take the time to explain it. And again, I come back to that with a story if you ask the question later. But I don't have much time, so I'm going to jump to the next thing that really bothers me the most right now. It's autonomous driving. I can't take it anymore. Okay, so autonomous driving, 2 years ago, CES 2018, everybody said, okay, that's it, the autonomous cars are coming, they are going to be everywhere, we are going to have those cars, on the road, and it's going to be beautiful. CES 2019, Las Vegas this year, I mean, people started to say, oh, maybe, it's going to take a little bit more than 5 years, and it's not that easy. Now we need to define autonomous driving. There are several ways to define it. So there is basically 5 levels, 1 to 5, and fully autonomous is level 5. What is fully autonomous driving? It's something that is going to drive as good as you would do. Okay? So it's going to adapt to any situation. So I have a scoop for you today. Autonomous driving level 5 with the current methods of artificial intelligence will never exist. Never. Not in 5 years, not in 20 years, not in 100 years, never. There are two examples for that. First example is not too far from here. It's called Place de l'Étoile in Paris, 6 p.m. Okay? So this example is very interesting because it's actually not following the rules of Code de la Route, you know, that you learn when you learn how to drive. It's following something else. It's following, you know, sociology rules. I mean, it's something else. It's negotiation rules. It's a lot of things that has nothing to do with driving. Okay? So think about that. And I just brought you to Place de l'Étoile, which is next door. I didn't bring you to Bangalore, you know, where it's yet another step in terms of negotiation. But I want to tell you about another case that is much more interesting, and this is one of the reasons for which Waymo, which is, you know, the most advanced company today in autonomous driving, said as well a few weeks ago that most likely we will never go to autonomous driving level 5. Before telling you the story, don't get me wrong. I mean, I want as much autonomy as we can have. And I'm sure that we'll go to level 3 and level 4. We are at the level 3 right now with Tesla, which is very, very good. I'm the first one to buy Teslas to my kids, okay? Because I know that my kids, when they are going to drive, they are going to text, they are going to drink, they are going to do all the bad things that they shouldn't do, and the machine is going to be much safer than themselves, okay? So I'm very happy to have those machines, but telling people and making them believe that we will have level 5 is just a lie. And it's part of the thing that we make people believe that is going to disappoint them at one time. Okay? So let me tell you the story of the Waymo thing. Waymo, about 2-3 months ago, 4 months ago, they released all the videos of the 11 million miles that their car drove in Palo Alto, Mountain View, and other states in the US. 11 million miles of video that are now public, you know, that you can go to watch on YouTube. It's not very exciting, huh? It's basically, you know, you see the car driving on the road, right? So when I go to watch the videos, my son tells me, you know, that I'm a little bit crazy because, you know, it would be better to play a video game, but I mean, I just love it, so I'm watching the videos. And those videos, again, not very exciting until you find, you know, the gem. And I found the gem, you know, a few weeks ago. Here's the video. So windshield, camera, right? And the car drives, and you see the road, you know, there, and the car drives, right? And stops in the middle of nowhere. Well, and then 2 seconds later, the car continues and stops again after 2 meters. And does it again. And then we have the feeling that the driver, because there is a driver, the driver takes back the control because most likely the guys know behind him are starting to honk or something, right? So what happens? So you look at the video again and again, and you start to zoom on the side of the video. And on the side of the video, you see 2 guys on the sidewalk. Okay, so interesting. And then you zoom again and you look very closely, and you see that one of the guys, you know, on the sidewalk, on his shoulder, he has a stop sign. So, of course, you, I hope, if you see that, you don't stop, right? Hopefully. So, but the car stops and stops and stops again, okay? So, of course, I'm sure now that, you know, Waymo, Google somewhere, you know, has a rule that says if there's a jerk with a, you know, a stop sign on the shoulder on the side, you know, continue. But the thing is that it's not really obvious to have the data first, so to find the data that is going to show that there is this case, and it's not obvious also to have the rule of that, to think about the fact that there would be someone, you know, with a stop sign is not very obvious. So anyway, all that to say that there won't be anytime soon, never, autonomous driving. I'm going to go a little bit fast on this one. This one, same thing. If you want to ask a question about Siri, I have some things, you know, to talk about, and it's actually our fault a little bit if people think that, you know, machine can be smart, and it was a mistake of ours because we make Siri look too smart. He or she is totally stupid. I mean, you know, the technology is bad. I can tell you, I mean, it wasn't as good. It was the same kind of technology than the other guys, but we just made it look better by adding what I call artificial stupidity. A little bit the same stupidity that you had when I asked about the number at the beginning, the addition at the beginning, right? And because we made it basically a little bit too anthropomorphic, you know, it made people think that actually it could be smart. And 300 million users use this thing thinking that it can be real. And even people, you know, made movies that made, you know, this thing believe that it could be a human. So it's a little bit our fault, but I have some stories about that I can talk about later if we have time. But I want to go fast and talk, you know, about this augmented intelligence that I was talking about, just to keep, you know, the acronym, and just to keep the letters, but it doesn't really mean anything. It just means that those things that we are building, machine learning, deep learning, and so on, they are just tools that we are in control with. They are tools that we are controlling. They are tools that are using rules that we give them. They are tools that have data that we select, okay? It can be bugs, there can be, you know, a lot of wrong choice of data or whatever, but we are in control. Everything that people like Laurent Alexandre or Elon Musk are telling you, it's marketing. I want to now go, you know, to this last slide here, where I'm going to draw life, draw intelligences. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to try, right? So here, this is the level of intelligence. You know, 0, Trump, to 100. 100 is a genius, right? Absolute genius, very good. 50, it's okay. 50 is basically, it's us. Well, okay, they're all the domains of intelligence, right? All the domains. But what is interesting there is that this graph is wrong already, because all the domains of intelligence is actually infinite, right? Infinite. So we are good, we're okay at everything, and we will be even better tomorrow at something else that we don't know about today. Very important what I just said, that we don't know about today. So now, you know, I'm going to say, okay, that's me at chess. I'm doing the slides, so I do what I want, right? So I decided that I'm okay. I'm a little bit, I'm not that good, but anyway. So that's me at chess, but you understood that now I'm going to show you what is artificial intelligence at chess. Artificial intelligence at chess, all good. It has all the moves, right? So unless you change the level of your machine, you know, that is going to say play at level 5, if you say, you know, play at level 10, it's going to beat you, for sure, okay? So this is it. Go. Go is interesting because it's not a finite game, and so there are some moves that never in humanity, you know, we humans have seen where, you know, they have been created using the rules by the machine. So I say, you know, it's going to be actually smarter than us. But it's in the very, very specific domain of Go. Then I'm going to say driving, you know, much better than my son, because he's texting all the time. And I'm going to take something that is next to driving, you know, very connex domain that I'm going to call delivery. It doesn't really matter, but it's something that I could learn from, right? We talk about learning from connex domains, so I'm going to put that one there. And I could draw any domain, and in any domain, we are going to be beaten by the machine. For sure. That's why we are going to do the machine, because the machine is going to be better than us. You know, and we're going to be placed well. So that's what we are. You are going to be able to beat that. And sometimes it's going to be, you know, a genius. Sometimes it's just going to be better than us, which is good, because it's good to have those machines replacing us to do those tasks that usually, you know, are not very interesting.